waiting on Brian. Steve, holler at Brian and tell him, come on.
Hit your gavel at the start.
Anybody sign up?
Nobody's public hearing. Did you write those? Get that done? She should, oh, okay. Yeah, she got an emailed update. Got it. I left the office about 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve, holler at Brian and tell him, come on. At 6 o'clock, I'd like to call this meeting of Lancaster County Council together. Welcome everyone here tonight. It's an honor for me to be here, sitting up here and seeing all these fine men and ladies and gentlemen of our law enforcement, our sheriff's department, and all our other first responders and public safety personnel. With that, would you please rise and join with Councilmember Terry Graham as he leads us in our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. We give thanks for this day and for our many blessings. We give thanks for all the law enforcement and public safety officials we have, and men and women in this county. We ask that you watch over this evening as we meet as a council to do the business of this county. Guide us and grant us wisdom to do what is best for all the citizens of this great county. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Let's move down to our approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Carnes. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to make an amendment. I'd like to move the item on the Edgewater discussion to move it up in front of the non-consent agenda items, that it be discussed before the non-consent agenda items.
Okay, so we go after 7E. Any objections, any discussion? I need a second.
Second.
Have a motion for Mr. Blackman to amend the agenda, and have a second for Mr. Graham. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval on our amendment. Now we're ready to vote on our agenda as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. All right, this evening we have a couple of special presentations. First of all, I'd like Mr. Preston Simpson to come forward. And Sheriff, if you don't mind stepping up here too. Before me today is Mr. Preston Simpson, the Lancaster County Sheriff's Department. Joined the Lancaster County Sheriff's Department in 2014. Finished #1 in the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. He also won the Director's Physical Fitness Award at the Academy. 2016, he was promoted to investigator, and he investigated all types of crimes, but has spent much of his time as an investigator working on sexual assault cases. He is also a member of the South Carolina Attorney General's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And investigating cases involving child sexual abuse material commonly trafficking over the internet. He's also a member of our Special Weapons and Tactics Team, or SWAT team, and he recently became a member of the Lancaster County Multi-Jurisdictional Violent Crime Task Force. He's also a task force officer serving on the Federal Bureau of Investigation Task Force involving several surrounding agencies. In 2019, he was recognized by the American Legion for award in bravery. And we thank you, and this is the third officer from Lancaster County to win this award since 2017. And it's an honor and privilege to be standing here before you.
I just want to say about Preston, I'll be honest, we got several officers that work hard and are worthy of being the top officer, throughout South Carolina. But Preston is a little special, and the reason I say that is when he came on, he had many other opportunities that he could have took advantage of, and he chose law enforcement. He wanted to serve the people here in Lancaster County. And once he became a deputy sheriff, he didn't do nothing but progress through the ranks. And when he became investigator, I often wondered, is his plate getting too full? And he said, Sheriff, this is the way I want it. We continue to get him stuff. And he's continued to excel and made Lancaster County proud, and certainly made me, the sheriff, and the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office a better agency for the services he provides. And I didn't get to mention this the other week, and I do want to mention it today or tonight. He couldn't do what he does if he didn't have good support at home. And he comes from a good family, and his wife is here tonight. I want to recognize her and just thank her for being supportive and allowing him to do what he does. And because I know if Mama's not happy, nobody's happy. We appreciate that. So thank you, Preston.
Mr. Chair, could I say something about Preston? I just want to congratulate him because he works so closely with our office, Paramedicines Against Sexual Assault. And every time I see him in and out of the door, they love him upstairs. Margot loves him, and I know when he comes in the office, everything's going to be handled. So I congratulate you again, and thank you for doing such a great job.
We have one more presentation here tonight. This is the third time since Sheriff Fail has been in office that the Lancaster County Sheriff Office has won the Santee Cooper Excellence in Law Enforcement Award presented by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Association. That's pretty remarkable. So we hope you can win this award at least 5 or 6 times. A couple more terms in office. Sheriff was nominated by Mr. Willis, our administrator. His nomination letter cited many forward-thinking initiatives and accomplishments of the Sheriff's Office under Sheriff Fail. The agency was accredited by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Coalition in 2011 and internationally by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies Incorporated, CALEA, in 2013. And the Sheriff's Office was recently reaccredited by CALEA last month, and this is the smallest and only one of 9 Sheriff's Offices or agencies in the state of South Carolina to be accredited by CALEA. The CALEA is the gold standard in law enforcement. That speaks a volume for the sheriff and these men and women out here and the commitment that they have made to our community. And a little more about the Sheriff's Department. Because of their innovative approaches in law enforcement, they have produced great results. Violent crime rate has dropped 25% in the last 4 years. Property crime has fallen 39%. And according to SLED in 2019, Lancaster Sheriff's Office led the state in clearing 87.9% of violent crimes. That's remarkable. It came in second in property crimes with a clearance rate of 48.7. During 2019, agents and deputies for the Drug Task Force made 970 drug-related arrests. And once again, I would like to congratulate you. And like I said, the sheriff, they just got recertified by Kalia, and I'll let the sheriff just talk about a little bit about what this means. He fully understands it. If you don't mind.
Well, I can say that, since we became an accredited agency, you know, this means that we have the best and latest best practices when it comes to services in law enforcement. And you know, since over the last few years, when we talk about reform and different things that you constantly see on the news, you know, we don't have to worry about those things. And the reason I say that is we've been doing the right thing since we got accredited back in 2011. I was at a meeting last week talking about reform and what we needed to do, putting standards on law enforcement agencies, not just officers. And all the things that they were talking about is already in place at the sheriff's office, and it's because of this right here. And I'm going to say that I can tell you, being the top law enforcement agency in the state, that's been a goal of mine since I became sheriff. I wanted other agencies to look at us and recognize Lancaster County as a model agency throughout the state. But Mr. Chairman, I can tell you, that would not be possible if it wasn't for those folks lined up against the wall back there. If it wasn't for them. Somebody's got to make it happen, and it's those folks right back there. I think about the partnerships that we built over the years, and I just can't thank Steve Willis, our council, enough for what you guys do to make sure you provide adequate funding for the sheriff's office, because I hear stories from all over the state, and I really believe we got the best council around. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't say it, because when I tell folks what we got and how we get it, cooperation we get from council, they just can't believe that. So this is a direct reflection of what you guys do and provide for the sheriff's office, and I appreciate that. So, thank you.
Once again, we would like to thank you and your agency for all that you do for our county. Y'all are welcome to stay if you want to, but I'll give you a couple of minutes if y'all want to clear on out. I completely understand.
Some of them probably on duty.
Yes, it is.
All right. We now come down to citizens' comments. Please bear in mind, this is not a period of dialogue with council or a question and answer period. This is your opportunity to address council of your concerns. I ask that you address your remarks to council as a body and not to any individual council member. Please speak into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to address council. Your time will not start until you have provided your name and address. We have Pamela Hams.
Good Good evening, and thank you for your time. And what a privilege it was to be here tonight to see the officers. I'm a proud member of Lancaster County. Just wanted to add one remark to the remarks that I made the last time I was here that I forgot to mention just because I get so nervous standing behind this podium. With the whole thing about the easement that we were talking about last time, I just wanted to make mention that when I signed the easement in 1994, the land was landlocked. So Ms. Cannon had no way in. So I did that as being a good neighbor to her so that she could get in and do her horse business and not be landlocked out as a single mom trying to provide for her son. So that was the reason that I signed the easement back then. As I mentioned before, since that time, there has been more property bought that has direct access from Henry Harris Road that would give them their own way in and out. So I just wanted to add that to the comments that I made prior to the prior meeting regarding the safety and the blocking and the parking that they say is ample up to a certain degree. You can get about 5 or 6 cars in there, but that leaves no room to back up if there's a horse trailer or any type of horse equipment. So in my view, it's not ample parking. I know they've been down there taking some pictures of a Suburban and a truck passing. I don't know if it shows up in their pictures or not, but that's not a horse trailer. That's not dually trucks that pull the horse trailers. And they also went off the driveway into the grass, which leaves ruts in the little bit of grass that we have left in the driveway. So I just wanted to make those statements and make you aware of those few things. And thank y'all for all your time, all your consideration in this circumstance that we're in. And I too, as the sheriff said, appreciate your service to our community. I've lived here over half of my life, and I'm a proud member of Lancaster County. And thank you for all that you do for us.
All right, thank you. That concludes our citizens' comments this evening. Let's move down to item number 7, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda items 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, and 7E.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Mostello to approve our consent agenda with a second from Ms. McGriff. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's go on down we moved item 9B up, discussion on Edgewater area default. Mr. Willis?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, this is a discussion item. We're not asking for a decision of council because this decision technically doesn't rest with council. It rests with the Forfeited Land Commission. That said, in speaking with Kerry Helms, who's head of the Forfeited Land Commission, they are interested in getting council's input on this matter. As a matter of background, I know Councilman Honeycutt, you've been on council long enough, you remember. Phase 2 of Edgewater, and this is the Edgewater down on Highway 200, not the business park up on 521, has been in default for almost a decade. During that time, there have been no payments made by the owner for the bonds or taxes. It's just been rolling every year. It is owned by one company, a developer, with the exception of 3 parcels. There are 3 that were actually sold in there. The last I heard, the developer was in the process of reacquiring those from the property owners. The property owner now has approached us, and again, we have not seen any documentation on that. Once their attorneys have that, it will go to John DeBose. Actually, the FLC has another attorney that represents them. John will touch base with that attorney. Also, the bondholders, we've also been in touch with the water and sewer districts, since a lot of this would involve their infrastructure. The proposal is, if the bond owners will forego past due bond amounts, and if the Forfeited Land Commission will forego past due taxes, the developer is prepared to spend the money to go back in and basically rebuild the infrastructure. They have the permit from DHEC to start that process. I do know that from working with the Water and Sewer District. DHEC permit is in hand. The water and sewer, obviously, the videos will tell the tale. More than likely, it's going to have to be rebuilt. Councilman Honeycutt, I know, when you're playing golf down there, you've seen some of the roads. I know the roads are going to have to be rebuilt in phase 2. So there's going to be a substantial investment. The downside to this for the bond owners is that's money they're not ever getting back. For the forfeited land commission with the taxes, it's money that's not ever coming back. The pro side that I see to this is it's an opportunity to put the property back on the tax rolls. It will move forward and start generating money, and it will not be a detriment to the rest of Edgewater that is being developed down there. And they're getting ready to start a new phase down there now. This is just one of the old legacy problem areas. So we wanted to get council's input. Kerry has asked for that information. I said I would bring it up tonight and allow council to express whatever opinions council may want to. But the way I see it, we can take no action and we're not getting any taxes for the next 20 years. It's not coming back on the tax rolls. Or we can take the haircut along with the bond owners on past due amounts and hopefully get this back on the tax rolls, get it going again, and have houses built. It will, be a benefit to the rest of Edgewater, which is developing, not a boil out there that you have to look at. So that's kind of where we are tonight, and just wanted to present this information. Again, the final decision on this will rest with the Forfeited Land Commission. It's not an administrator decision, it's not a council decision, it's FLC decision. That said, they are soliciting your input and advice.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. McGrail.
And that was my question, because we don't have anything to do with this at this time because it's the Forfeited Land Commission. But are we the ones who will decide moving forward what needs to happen with the developers? When you said take action, what do you mean take action?
If the bond owners and the Forfeited Land Commission agree to this, and again, I'm stressing, we have not seen the final documentation on this. We just haven't seen it. They have come to us with a conceptual plan. That's something that the developer is going to have to do because that is covered by a development agreement. So they're going to have to modify the development agreement. That happens, it comes to council. But the decision on the foregoing the taxes is an FLC. But, it may be they're simply just going to continue on under the existing development agreement and move forward under the terms and conditions within that existing development agreement. We simply don't know. They have not submitted the documentation yet. Like I said, when that comes in, it will come to John DeBose, go to the planning staff, planning commission, county council. Bondholders obviously would be private sector.
At this point, I don't think I would know enough to say yea or nay because it's in somebody else's hands now. But once all that information is gathered, I think that's when I would want to have a really good discussion around what ifs and what potentially could happen.
Right, and tonight we're just, the Forfeited Land Commission, if council say, oh gosh, we're just totally opposed to the concept of giving up those past taxes, they're interested. But tonight is purely conceptual. We
That's a no-brainer right there.
Hard documentation.
Well, Mr. Willis, who is the developer?
True Homes.
True Homes?
Yes, sir.
And I want to say, this is a classic example of why I believe the county should not be in the position of floating bonds to support some of these developments, when in fact, we're one of the fastest growing places in the United States. When we look at Indian land by itself. So this tells me why I don't want to be involved in this going forward with other developers and other developments. But how much tax are we talking about that's gone unpaid?
I will have to get that information. Like I said, at this point, it's conceptual.
So, and then how much land And here's my thought, and it's not, it's just a thought. If this land is appraised for a certain value, I don't know what it would be. Is it appraised by lots, like 30,000 a lot? Is it appraised, 3,000, 4,000 an acre? And then when you do the calculation of the tax on that amount, you would think that their tax sales, somebody would have bought this land at a tax sale. But then, this might be a question for Daniel, is who would be on first? Are the bondholders on first before our taxes, or will our taxes in a lien situation, in a settlement situation, be on first?
I would defer to Daniel on that. My understanding is it's simultaneous. And what the problem with, not only looking at past taxes, you had that past due bond amount, and it was pretty significant. And I think that was what killed anybody else coming in moving forward.
But see, I would think we would need to know the amount of bond indebtedness that's been unpaid before we could, as Councilwoman McGriff said, I think we're eye to eye on this. I'm just being a little more specific in my concerns that we need more information. But I will say this too, I commend the treasurer for seeking advice and ideas from us. She's got to be thanked for that. That was very insightful on her part. Do we know we can trust this developer if we were to forgive the taxes, or if the Forfeiture Land Commission would? What gives us the belief that all this will be cured if all this went forgiven anyway?
And again, that's where you had mentioned the devil's in the details. We have not seen the documentation. One of the things I would be asking John DeBose, and I'm sure the FLC attorney would ask, is there would be some kind of performance clause in there. If you don't perform within a certain period of time, the forbearance goes away.
And in a way, when the IRS forgives taxes in their Fresh Start program, one thing they look really seriously at is the financial standing of that entity that owes the taxes. And I would really like to know a lot more about True Homes in order to be able to give an opinion on how we should proceed forward with this too.
Right. And like I said, at this point, we're just asking, do y'all, it sounds like there's no objection to the concept and fleshing out details, which both the FLC and council would need.
That would not put us in any position if we just say, give us the concept and additional information. But is it similar to the Walnut Creek situation that we were in some years ago? Is it similar to that? Or it's totally different from that?
It's similar in that the only thing with Walnut Creek, we had a company that came in and bought the bonds that was also the developer. So, there are similarities. I don't want to try to say that it's the same scenario. It's not.
Mr. Chairman, could I get my 2 cents worth in here?
Yes, sir.
This is in my district, and I have followed this now for 14 years. I have seen different owners come in. I have seen promises made, promises unkept, and that'll put a bad taste in your mouth. The folks who now own Edgewater, they have done a remarkable job, in my opinion, over the last 5 years. Their sales was about 100 new homes last year, or year before last. They exceeded that this past year. What they're doing there's plans for more houses to go over where the golf course clubhouse is. Maybe 300, 350 homes in there. They don't do poor work. They do wonderful work. The land that we're talking about here is land that, and I go by there occasionally. The infrastructure is bad. But I look at it like this. You can't get blood out of a tournament. There is no blood for us to get there. Nothing, absolutely nothing. We have an opportunity for these folks to come. They're already there. They already know the infrastructure is going to have to probably be rebuilt. To go ahead and do whatever is necessary so that homes can be built there in the future, where Lancaster County will get tax revenue. We aren't getting it now, but it's time that we do get it. The plans that these folks have got down there are remarkable, in my opinion, and I have supported the new owners, and I'll continue to support these new owners because I think they're doing a great job. They inherited the problem with this forfeited land problem that exists down there, and the bondholders and all. They inherited that. There is a way to get out of it. It's not going to cost Lancaster County one thing, but in the future we will reap the benefits of what they're wanting to do down there. So I support whatever they do. I think it's a win-win for the county, in my opinion. Everything they have told me they were going to do, they have done. They have been very upfront with me. They've got a beautiful, beautiful facility there. People love it down there. The only thing, you got to drive 6 miles to get a pack of crackers, and I'm not sure that's good. But that's coming. We've talked about maybe some fire building help down there and different things. EMS is down there this week doing a commercial for the state. I think it is, Steve. I'm not sure if that's correct, but I think it's the state. So they picked Edgewater. Yeah,
recruitment, retention.
They picked Edgewater because it's a great place. It's a lovely place to live, and I support it, and I'll continue to support it for my remaining time on this council.
And I apologize for not recognizing Mr. Honeycutt being back with us tonight. He's made it through back surgery, and good to see him here tonight.
Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Mosteller.
Steve, I do like putting this property back on the tax rolls. I think that's the smart thing to do. The county can start bringing some money in for this property. But I also would like to see maybe this developer do all the infrastructure first before any permits are pulled, anything, all the infrastructure completed. And that way, if he bellies up, at least the property would be improved. So that's something I would like to see.
That would be a performance clause that we would ask John in whatever documentation comes forward. Like I said, everything at this point is still 100% conceptual.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
now when we talk in infrastructure, we're also talking about the roads.
Yes, sir,
Do they
roads,
have to bring them up to current standards now, or would it be back to where they were?
have to bring them up to the standards under that development agreement.
You're talking about the you're talking about the old standards?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Well, that's not gonna be very good.
Not as good as the current ones, but it'll be better than what's there.
Right.
I agree, it might be better, but it's problematic. And are those roads gonna be county roads then?
No.
The main road will be. I do not believe the others are. I will need to check the development agreement on that, but the main parkway I know would be considered a collector road. I do not believe the others would be.
Well, before I make a comment on it, I would like to see the proposal. I mean, I don't have a problem with somebody proposing something, but I sure not gonna make any comments on it till I see the proposal.
Mr. Chairman, I feel confident that once they start, they've got to go ahead on this, that building the roads, we have discussed roads when I've been down there before. They want the roads to be in whatever the county wants them to do about roads. And I feel confident that once we do this, that they will build roads based on our specification. That's the feeling I get, Mr. Gray.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I just need to see it in writing in a proposal. I mean, I just think that's the thing that needs to happen, and I've no doubt that you've talked to them and you feel confident they're gonna do that, but let's have it in writing.
The roads they're talking about now are really in bad shape. I mean, they'll have to be taken up and redone, and I'm sure that when they go back, they'll go back with the specifications that the county has, and I think they'll feel good about it. I will.
That holds true for any development agreement we have. Development agreement locks in the UDO standards, so if we update the UDO at some later time, any property we have that's covered by a development agreement, it's locked in at the time of the development agreement.
Well, I understand it's
Yeah,
locked in, but we are in a negotiating phase.
Yeah, they don't have to do
That's
that.
one of the requirements that we want to negotiate on, then they should be willing to come to the table and accept that as part of the negotiation.
Yeah, especially when it comes back to us after they move forward and it gets to us, I think we're in a position to negotiate.
I don't know if it comes before
Well,
council.
that's the thing, if they don't want to change the development agreement, this won't come back to council. If they do want to amend the development agreement, then that certainly would have to come back to council.
So
for
we'll
three
be in a
readings of the
position where we won't be able to negotiate anything unless they choose to come back. That's what you're saying?
Ma'am.
Well, the Forfeited Land Commission can negotiate on behalf of the county.
Right.
Well, if that's the input that they wanted, they got the input from the council, and the council has expressed their concerns, so hopefully the Forfeited Land Commission will take note of council's comments.
Right.
Well, it is a fact that this is a win-win for the county. Whatever they do, they'll be doing it out of their pocket, not the county. But for me, seeing that area and knowing that area as well as I do, I see Edgewater as a catalyst for tremendous growth down South 200 coming from the city of Lancaster. It's going to have to happen because there's a lot of land there that's usable. But I do see Edgewater as being the one thing that will really promote growth south of the city of Lancaster. And hopefully that means someplace you can go get some milk, bread, and whatever else you want, and you won't have to drive 100 miles to do it.
As Jamie Gilbert often says, it doesn't pass the ice cream test, it'll melt before you get home. But again, in closing, just simply from, the administrative standpoint, I kind of look at it from the standpoint of, either we can play ball with them and hopefully get this back on the tax rolls, or we take a hard line, it'll be sitting there 20 years from now with no taxes and no bonds and still falling apart.
I think it's a wonderful idea that, we're looking at putting it back on the tax roll, but surely as council, we've got to look at the liabilities that we have if we decide to move forward. I think that's what everybody is sort of
ma'am.
expressing.
All right, any more comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Willis. Okay, we're ready to move down to our non-consent agenda. 8A, Resolution 1133-R2021 regarding authorization to initiate the filling of 3 new positions. Do I have a motion?
Second?
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt. Second for Mr. Carnes. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, basically what we're asking for tonight is to start the hiring process. The proposal is second pay period in February is when these folks would come on. That said, for a deputy coroner, the probate court case manager, and the sheriff's crime scene technician, it takes a while because you have to post the jobs, you go through the interviews. So in order to actually have somebody ready to start by the second pay period in February, I need to go ahead and turn the probate judge, the sheriff, and the coroner loose on these positions. I know council has asked for information about potentially doing something on solid waste employees. That will be coming in February. I would note that the funding we're talking about here, we're not asking for any additional general fund balance funding. This is all coming from a budget transfer because the sheriff had some positions that we budgeted. We didn't know if the grant was going to be continued or not. The grants were continued. So this is all budget transfers.
But it will be included in the next budget year.
Yes, ma'am. That was fixing to hit that point. When we budget next year, we have to include a full year for these positions. This is a partial year, but presuming we bring them on, you're exactly right, Councilwoman. Full year next year, we've got to look at that for the budget. That said, the deputy coroner position and the probate court case manager were specifically identified by council when we had the budget sessions earlier this past year, calendar year, earlier this fiscal year. The sheriff's crime scene technician, you've heard several meetings ago, I think in November, on the violent crime multi-jurisdictional task force. That was a position that was not funded. Barry's got to have that as part of the grant match. So those are the 3 positions tonight. We're asking for permission to just go ahead and let the probate judge, coroner, sheriff, go ahead, post the positions, get started, but with caveat, they don't start till the second pay period in February.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I have no problem with these 3 positions, but I I am concerned about the convenience site workers. If you say February, I'm expecting at the next meeting in February how much we're recommending and how much it's gonna affect the budget. It's no sense in us delaying this. The fact that, they're already in the mud, we need to bring them out of the mud as soon as possible. So I think at the last meeting, I requested that we have the total amount that it would affect the budget and how much you're gonna recommend an increase in their salary.
In the resolution, fiscal impact on these three positions are $72,285. Part of that is a transfer from Department 110 to Department 068.
No, I'm talking about the convenience site workers. I do
yes,
understand
ma'am.
that. But I'm saying how much it's gonna
First or
affect.
second meeting in February. I know we talked February, but I don't want to put you on the spot for first if we're planning on second. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly support Ms. McGriff in her comments about the convenience site workers, but I would say that, pulling them out of the mud is important, but pulling the coroner and the probate judge out of the swamp is even more important to me.
Well, I really wanna pull them all at the same time, That's what I want.
Let's take care of this one right now. We will,
One question, Mr. Chairman, please. What is Department 110?
Department 110 is the sheriff's office.
Okay.
068, 069, probate court and coroner.
Figured those out. I just couldn't get 110. Thank you.
Mr. Carnes, would you like
Could
to
I
say anything?
continue my conversation? Thank you, sir. I think that pulling the coroner and the probate court out from all the things that they are under because of the growth that we have experienced and that we continue to experience is one of the most important things that we've got in front of us right now. And we need to do this and pass this so that they can go ahead and get these positions in place, and we probably need to be looking for additional positions in future budgets for them.
And one thing I want to mention, I think all of y'all have seen the email traffic, the issues that the coroner's office has had with DHEC and the death certificates. It's not limited just to Lancaster County. It's statewide. It's been a problem, but I think she's still here. I want to recognize
I didn't
Representative
see-
McGarry.
I apologize
up-
for not recognizing you also.
On a day off, spent time at the coroner's office so she could see firsthand the issues they were having with DHEC. Got on the phone, she called somebody, Sandy, you may want to come up and explain this. She called somebody who called somebody. Next thing you know, the head of DHEC is on the phone with Carla. So, Sandy, you want to come up and mention that real briefly?
I've apologized for not recognizing you before this meeting,
It's
too.
been a busy night. So we ended up, first of all, the coroners now have a 48-hour turnaround time to get out their death certificates. That has put a burden on the coroner's office. First of all, because they can't release the death certificates, they don't know how. The coroner's office is having a problem because they weren't trained, the hospitals weren't trained, and the funeral homes weren't trained. So they have what they call the BRPs, which is their pre-release to a death certificate, where they have to fill out all this information. That has to be released within 48-hour turnaround. Hospitals are getting jammed up with that. They had 7 bodies they couldn't release on Thursday. This was after I had already met with Carla and spent the day with her. The backlog is incredible. Funeral homes don't know how to release them, are having problems releasing them. Carla's having to teach them what the drop-down systems that they have in this new system is just incredible. It's not working properly. They have to search. You can't search for a name. I'm sorry, a date of death. You can only search, you can only search by date of death. You cannot search by name. So if, say, Randy calls over from the solicitor's office and wants to know if John Doe passed away, she asks, well, do you know when? No, I'm asking you that. She has to go by year and search. Whereas before, she could just search by name and say, yes, he died on blah, 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 or no, he didn't. Now she has to go by year, by year, by year, by year, by year, by year. Very tedious. Funeral homes don't know how to release a death certificate. It's incredible. So The backlog is just, they're working 7 days a week now, because if they get a body or a person in on a Thursday, they have to have it released on a Saturday. If they get it in on a Friday, they have to have it released on a Sunday. This is across the state. It's not just here in Lancaster, it's everywhere. So, the backlog, I can't even explain to you how bad it is. Not to mention employees having COVID in their own, like hospitals, funeral homes, and at the coroner's offices. So they're already short-staffed. So I got a hold of Chip Huggins, who's a representative, because they're charging a $9 extra fee on top of everything. So per death certificate, they're getting a $9 extra fee because DHEC said. So we looked, and it wasn't in any regs, and found out that they didn't have the right to do that, or we didn't think. So I'm on the regulations committee, so we got a hold of Chip Huggins, who's the chairman, and then we got the director of DHEC on the phone. And so Carla went through every single thing that's wrong, and so now they're trying to fix it. I don't know if they're ever going to get it fixed properly, but they are trying. But it's not just here, it's everywhere. The backlogs, everything. So I don't know what to say. I mean, poor Carla. If she's got it bad, and she's one of the best in the state, I can't even imagine like Richland, Charleston, anywhere else. And Carla's not one to complain. So that's where we're at. I have another letter going out tomorrow
All right.
and a call, so.
Thank you very much for that information. And as far as the convenience sites workers, we will put that on February,
Yes, sir.
okay? All right, any more questions for Mr. Willis before we vote? Hearing none, we have a motion for Mr. Honeycutt for approval of Resolution 1133-R 2021. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8B, Resolution 1134-R 2021, updating the continuity of county government plan. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion for Mr. Graham. Who was second?
Second.
Mr. Blackman. Mr. Willis or Mr. Player?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, if you have any questions on the plan, I'll certainly defer to Darren on that. We just simply note, we do this every 2 years. When a new council starts, we have to go through and adopt the plan for continuity of county government. If, somebody falls, who's the next person up? And no real changes from what we've done in the past. Would note that we identify the way council succeeds by title and by seniority rather than by name. So it's chair, vice chair, secretary. Beyond that, senior member of council based on date they took the oath of office. If two took the same time, alphabetical. Yeah. So we'll do it again, and well, I won't be here, but y'all will do it again in 2023.
All right, thank you, Mr. Willis. Any discussion?
In the document, it talked about each department identifying records essential to continue the operations of the county. Have the departments identified their records that are essential? Do you have a written?
I'll defer to Darren, like that's anything technical on the.
And one more follow-up while he's walking up. Our backup for data, do we have off-site storage for data?
Partially, that is one thing that we've identified, and, Kim and the correspondence, 365 and the file shares is underway.
To answer your question, I don't have the authority to go look, but I would suspect some have and some aren't. Nobody really took this plan serious until this year. I can't tell you how many department heads and people involved have told me point blank, we heard you always say that. We heard Morris stand up here and say that, and we thought this doesn't apply to us. But now with COVID, I think everybody understands they need a depth of leadership, because there's not a department in this county that hadn't been affected this year by COVID cases that have caused quarantines, Luckily, a lot of people are able to work from home because of having the ability to go to iPads. So I think people will begin to take it more serious about the particular records that they're supposed to know about. You would think they would do that anyway, particularly the essential things, but I don't have any way of really knowing that.
Well, we as council, by approving this, we are authorizing and so to speak, demanding that our staff do that, because it is important, and we now have realized the importance of a pandemic, if nothing else. But yeah, thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Should that not be something we require each department to prepare and give to Darren as part of his documentation?
The paperwork side of that could be phenomenal, but I think you should require them. You've got division heads that can oversee us as department heads. It may be that those division heads can guarantee or provide some mechanism by which that individual department says, I've done this, and I don't necessarily want to add more paperwork to people's jobs, because it's already a paperwork thing that's involved, but that way they can be sure that they've recognized what is the essential parts of the organization that they're responsible for.
And Darren, is it a checklist or something that's available to each
No,
department?
ma'am, it's each department individually knowing what they do and the essential records that they need to run their department.
You know, to follow up to Brian's question, maybe some sort of authorization that they sign off that they, that information can be provided.
And I think your division head setup that you've done would probably be the best way to do that. That way it stays within the individual chains of command.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, sir, we'll take a look at that. As always, some departments we don't really control, so.
All right, thank you. I
We
think
do
we're ready.
control their money, though.
Any more discussion? I think we're ready to vote. Have a motion for Mr. Graham for approval of Resolution 1134-R2021. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8C, Resolution 1135-R21 regarding amending the county council meeting calendar for council committees. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
From Ms. McGriff, second from Mr. Mosteller. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, as council previously approved, we're doing a 6-month trial period, committee of the whole. The calendar that we've adopted, we need to formally modify to reflect that, and this resolution simply modifies it through the month of July. Sometime about June, council's going to have to decide, is it something you want to stick with? Do you want to go back to the old system? We'll have to take a look at that time. But this is simply a 6-month trial period.
Any discussion? All right, we have a motion from Ms. McGriff for approval of Resolution 1135-R2021. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8D, Resolution 1136-R21 regarding giving preliminary approval to issue Walnut Creek Improvement District Assessment Revenue Bond Series 2021 A-3. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion from Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second to get it to the floor?
I'll second it.
A second for Mr. Graham. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, John DeBose could not be here tonight, but that's all right. We have Michael Sazine from the Burr Foreman Law Firm Group, who is a bond attorney practicing with Franny Heiser. And since we're talking about bonds, Michael's going to cover the technical part. Would simply note back in 2016 by way of ordinance, let me make sure I get the right number here. Ordinance 2016-1393. Council at that time approved bonding capacity for Walnut Creek. Walnut Creek has not utilized the full amount of the bonding capacity that was approved. They are now asking to utilize the balance of the bonding capacity Michael will cover that. I would note that these are special source revenue bonds that full faith and credit of Lancaster County is not pledged. So they're special source. You know, we don't back it up with tax dollars. Would note that we received the email this afternoon, and I passed it on to council. The funding would be used for roads and paving, sanitary sewer, and water. The amount that they're proposing to actually spend would exceed the amount of the bonds. Anything exceeding that amount is on the developer. They have to do that. Would note that the proposal, and Michael will cover this, the proposed bonding institution is a sophisticated investor. They're well aware of, you know, what can go wrong with something like this. So it's not one that, you know, worried about the mom and pops getting out there now. You know, once they hit full build out, you know, could have something similar to what's happened at Sun City. Some of those bonds have actually been sold to commercial investors. But Sun City is at build out. It's not going anywhere. So we wouldn't have a similar situation to what we had at Walnut Creek earlier. And with that, Michael, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening. My name is Michael Season. I'm with Burr Foreman McNair, the old McNair firm. Like the musician Prince, we're the law firm formerly known as the McNair firm, but we're still the same folks that we have. We've been involved with Lancaster County for a number of years. I've been involved with the Walnut Creek bonds that were issued about 5 years ago, as well as a lot of the modifications to the ordinances that were undertaken before. As Steve mentioned, this has a long history. These bonds were originally issued about 15 years ago. The Walnut Creek area was originally known as Edenmore. Following the non-payment of assessments and the process of going into the Forfeited Land Commission, a single developer bought all of the land that was in the development. The same developer bought all of the bonds that permitted ripe conditions for a workout. They were able to both put money into the original phase of the Walnut Creek area. In 2016, they took they asked, at their request, the county agreed to split the district, the assessment district, into 3 separate parts: Bond Area 1, Bond Area 2, Bond Area 3, and they allocated the originally issued bonds to each one of those bond areas. The reason for that is that the bonds are paid from assessments that are imposed on individual properties within the district. And by splitting them into specific bond areas, the county was able to refinance part of the debt at a lower debt service cost that was backed up solely by what we call performing assets. So the first bond area that was most fully developed was the assessments were being collected annually, and they were able to pay the bonds. The bond areas 2 and 3 have debt that's associated with each bond area. In 2016, which was about 5 years ago, right after this refinancing, the county agreed to increase the size of those 2 bond areas to include additional parcels. And then it also issued about $3.5 million of bonds specifically for improvements within Bond Area 2. So Bond Area 2 has got about $10.5 million of bonds that are associated with it. The authorization, as Steve mentioned, that the bonds issued about 5 years ago came from, actually authorized not exceeding $8 million of bonds for Bond Areas 2 and 3. So there's about $4.6 million of authorization left. The developer has requested the county to again issue bonds, which would be used to pay for infrastructure solely within Bond Area 3. So these bonds wouldn't be paid from assessments in Bond Areas 1 or 2. I think Steve had forwarded to council a breakdown of what the bonds would be used for, the proceeds for infrastructure like roads, paving, water and sewer. I think there's there might be sidewalks as well. As Steve mentioned, the improvements for Bond Area 3 add up to about $5.2 million. So anything above and beyond what the county issues, the developer would be responsible for. The proposal that has been presented is from Preston Hollow Capital, which is a sophisticated non-bank financial institution that specializes both in municipal assets, but also in community developments like this. The materials that they provided suggest that they've been involved in transactions both outside of the state of South Carolina as well as within the state of South Carolina. If the council approves this tonight and approves the ultimate issuance of the bonds, the bondholder would execute what's called a sophisticated investor representation letter, or we call them big boy letters. As the name implies, they acknowledge that they're sophisticated, that they have done their due diligence, that they're not relying on the county or information that is provided specifically about the development, other than what they've obtained through their own knowledge. They acknowledge that they are an accredited investor or a qualified institutional buyer, which are designations under the securities law for sophisticated investors, well-capitalized funds, in other words. They would agree that during the initial term of the bonds, they're buying these bonds for their own account, so not with a view towards distribution. If and when the properties were performing assets like Bond Area 1, such that the property values exceeded the value of the outstanding debt, they would have the ability to sell to other investors who are not accredited investors. That's way far down the road. Think about it in terms of the difference between the original bonds that were issued for Bond Area 1 and the transaction that was done in 2016 for that refinancing. That wouldn't have been possible unless the houses, the infrastructure had been put in, the houses and other developments had been sold, both built and sold, and that there was a mature, stable, seasoned revenue source that would be available to pay the bonds. The proposal that they provided, I think, is fairly straightforward. As I mentioned, it would fund both the financing of capital improvements, the public improvements, excuse me. It would also provide a debt service reserve fund sized to about 5% of the bonds. I think in the proposal, assuming a $4.4 million bond issue, that'd be about $220,000. That money would be held by a bond trustee, specifically for the benefit of the bondholder should there be an interruption or a hiccup in the collection of assessment revenues for this purpose. At this point, one last thing. The proposal that they provided and what council is being asked to do tonight is to give preliminary approval for these bonds. This is a very preliminary step. The proposal is not binding. It is subject to due diligence and the further development of information. If council gives the approval tonight and authorizes the chair to execute this term sheet, which would be the next step would be for the purchaser and the developer and us to become engaged in order to put together the documentation for the issuance and sale of the bonds. We would then bring that back to county council at the time that it was ripe for review. It would require 3 readings and a public hearing. I think Steve that was mentioned in the agenda materials. So what's being asked for tonight is a preliminary approval, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them. Or Steve is.
Go ahead, Mr. Black.
Well, number one is, first of all, I'm against this in general principle, but this is commercial, so I do believe sometimes it's good to incentivize commercial development, but residential, we've got plenty in this county. But I noticed that the last time some bonds were issued, 3.38, what was that used for? And then what, we're saying that this is going to be used for infrastructure, possibly sidewalks, et cetera, but I've not seen any plans as to what this is specifically going to be used for.
I'll answer the question about the bond, Steve, and maybe you can address the question about the infrastructure. The last bond issue for Bond Area 3 was in 2016. There were bonds that were issued in $3.6 million. The last bond issue those were exchanged in 2006. In 2016, there was a bond issue for Bond Area 2, which was $2.7 million. So I'm not sure where the 3.3, if it relates to one of them.
Well, I'm just looking at page 2 of 4. First paragraph.
Yes. I'm sorry, I was looking at outstanding amounts. So these are the bonds, the bonds that were issued in 2016 for Bond Area 2. So that was part of the $8 million authorization that County Council gave in 2016, but those bonds were issued specifically for Bond Area 2. They were solely backed by the assessments that were collected in Bond Area 2.
But has that infrastructure been installed?
My belief is yes.
Yes, sir. The infrastructure in Phase 2, as you recall, on Phase 1, we had the component off Jim Wilson Road. And then you could go down to the recreation center, and then things just pretty well stopped. Phase 2 carried all that, connected on through from the Jim Wilson side to the amenity center, coming back to the Parks and Recreation facility. Again, this is a Public Works Improvement District bond, so it can't be spent on building houses. It has to be spent on infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, sewer, things of that nature. So that has been done. This is Phase 3. If you go back down on Hancock Road, you'll see an area that's being developed. It backs up to the state line, and this would be, again, infrastructure in that area.
Is this the same area where someone was asking that we allow only 1 acre to be commercial, so they would meet their development agreement, and that we naturally denied that?
Yes, sir. On Walnut Creek, there was a 10-acre parcel up near the front that is reserved for commercial, and they asked it go residential, and we can't do that under state law. There's got to be some type of mixed use.
This is a different
And
parcel?
so that was turned down. Now, it's still designated commercial. The one thing I want to stress to you, it may sit empty for 20 years. As long as it's designated for commercial development, they're complying with state law.
So this is a different parcel?
No, it's the same
The
parcel.
Phase 3 is back towards Hancock Road, back towards the North Carolina line, yes, sir.
So this is a
But the
different parcel.
10-acre parcel is the one that's out on
Yes, sir.
521.
It fronts at 521.
But the 10-acre parcel, the reference here, is that an Area 3 or is that parcel?
I would have to ask, I believe that the commercial is part of Phase 3, but again, these bonds can't be used to build a commercial
I understand that. I was just curious if there was going to be another 10-acre parcel in Area 3 that's commercial.
No, sir.
Should we not have some sort of map or something to give us more to go on than this?
We can. I mean, at this point, like I said, tonight's preliminary. We're just wanting to go,
So-
work with the bond company to move forward because the capacity's out there. I mean, this is one of those things, in talking with John DeBose, we really wanted to make sure council was aware of this. That's why we're bringing a resolution, and because of the time length, as Michael mentioned, we're actually planning on bringing another ordinance. Don't have to. The other ordinance is out there. It's still binding and in effect. But due to the time and things have changed, this would be a different bondholder. We just want to make sure council's aware of. We can talk to the developer, but I can tell you in general, if you go back Hancock Road, back to the North Carolina line, and I'm not sure the exact name of the roundabout that's right there near the amenity center where you go down the hill, and like I said, you go back to the North Carolina line, brings up against Millbridge.
So,
There will be a connector in Millbridge in that phase.
the assessment for this bond is going to be only for the residents of Area 3. It's not going to be, will the other residents be assessed it also?
I'll let Michael cover assessment.
Sure. The assessments for each of the bond areas are only levied on the property owners for that bond
Bond
area.
area.
So the assessments for this bond will only come from the property owners, whether it's residential or commercial, for property that's located in bond area 3.
So,
It will not affect the assessments for bond areas 1 or bond area 2.
yeah, bond area 1 or 2 will not see any change in their assessment.
That's correct.
And the second question is, do we have any idea what the assessment would be per house? Or we know how many houses, we know how many, we could work it out. Do we have a dollar amount for that yet?
I don't have that tonight. Back in 5 years ago, when the assessment documents were modified, the way that the assessment documents work is that it's a formula based on the amount of debt that could be issued for the particular area, and then based on the type of residential or equivalent residential unit. So commercial properties have a different assessment load than a residential property does, and you multiply the number of lots by the ERU, and then you can figure out what the maximum assessment that could be imposed on a specific piece of property is. I believe.
Can you cover briefly, once that's calculated, the developer is required by law to disclose that
That's
to
right.
any purchaser.
That's right. And when
Yeah, I don't know that, and it may be by law, but I've talked to enough residents in Walnut Creek to know that they got a surprise that they're closing.
So, real quick, just to go back, the maximum amount that can be imposed by law is set when the assessment district is set up or when the modification occurs. So in 5 years ago, when this bond area was modified, there was a maximum amount per lot. I believe that is $1,200 per lot, but it's driven by the amount of debt that's actually outstanding. So the residents that are out there right now are likely paying something much, much less than for an annual assessment. Once the debt is issued, their annual assessment would go up. As Steve mentioned, when the district was modified, there's material that's filed in the land records so that if you're buying a house, for example, and there's a title search the title company performs in order to do the closing, there should be material that you have access to. Now, whether that comes the day of closing or that comes before, the developer also is duty-bound to make sure that folks know that when they buy a house, their assessments can go up.
I understand, but when people are buying houses, they are pretty excited and they don't always pay attention to detail.
That's it.
My only concern is the proceeds will be used to develop a 10-acre commercial tract. Before I'm going to vote for this, I want to make sure that is the 10 acres out front, and this is not 1 acre out front and 9 acres in the floodplain. Personally, I'd like to see a drawing before I approved.
Yes, we can certainly have that when we have the ordinance readings, bring that back to you, because that, again, it's not mandated, but we've decided we're going to do this by way of an ordinance, just the length of time that has gone on, and make sure I's are dotted, T's are crossed, everything's fresh on everybody's mind.
Any other?
So why do we have a resolution? Why couldn't this just been a preliminary discussion and then go to an ordinance?
The resolution, my understanding, Michael, jump in here, is simply to approve the negotiation of terms and agreements along the terms that were done. At this point, it's not a guarantee that the bond owner is going to pull the trigger on this. That's where you get into some of the bond negotiations.
That's right. The bond purchaser, when presenting the proposal to the county that they were interested in buying the bond, they'd asked for the term sheet to be approved. And when Steve and I met with John DeBose, it was our collective wisdom that in order to execute that term sheet, that required a vote by council.
Yeah.
As a preliminary resolution, which is what we set up.
And because a council already approved this bond, it's already approved. What's the legal status of that if we turn it down?
The council is always free to turn down, even though it's been approved before. I think the point that Steve was trying to make is that the issuance of the debt has been previously approved, so this isn't a new or additional request. This is approving something that had been approved before. The last approval was 5 years ago, and again, our collective wisdom was the ordinance before, even though it authorized a sufficient amount of bonds, it contemplated that the bonds would be sold to Saybrook, which is the holder of the bond area 2. It doesn't specifically say that they would be sold to anybody that the county would rather sell to. And secondly, with the passage of time, with 5 years, this council may have a different view about whether it wanted these bonds to issue. And so we felt that it was appropriate to come back before council with once a real proposal was in hand to start this process.
I think to Mr. Graham's point, though, he's saying if we turn it down, do they still have the legal right to issue the bonds because they were approved in 2016?
My view is that they cannot force you to issue bonds. That is a legislative function. I can't force the county council chair to sign his name on behalf of the county. With that said, we would hope that actions that are approved by council would still be palatable and preferable to continue. So we would hope that county council would come to the same conclusion that it would authorize that issuance now.
And Michael, your billable hours on this, what are we talking about money-wise? And we're also talking about another law firm involved. What kind of costs are involved, and then who's going to absorb those costs?
The cost would be paid from the bond proceeds.
About how much of those costs, legal fees and?
It would be based on the amount of time. My hope is that a private placement would be a more efficient venture than in 2016 when you did a public deal for Bond Area 1. But I'd have to pull that information.
So, if we approve this tonight, we will still we'll have an opportunity to see a site plan and all that before final approval.
The resolution tonight merely authorizes John and Michael to enter into negotiations with the bond firm to go ahead and bring a proposal so they can craft an ordinance to bring back to council for your consideration.
Okay.
Well, I'm okay with that, but I sure want to see the details.
Okay. All right, any more questions? Thank y'all. Hearing none, we have a resolution 1136-R 2021. We have a motion for approval from Ms. McGriff, seconded by Mr. Graham. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8E. We have a public hearing, resolution 1137-R 2021 regarding approval of the master development plan submission for a proposed apartment development known as the Lodges at Indian Land. And I guess we'll do this just like an ordinance. We will have planning staff will tell us about this.
Mr. Teff will be coming up to handle that. I would note for the record, nobody signed up for the public hearing.
Okay. Come on up. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Good evening, Commissioners. All right. All right. The request here, excuse me, get my glasses, I'll be unfogged a little bit, to approve the master development plan. There's an error on that slide. Sorry, it should not say a preliminary plat. That's a carryover from the Planning Commission. My apologies. It's a 217-unit apartment development known as Lodge at Indian Land on approximately 38.88 acres. It's located on the north side of Fort Mill Highway, just approximately 325 feet east of Rosemont Drive. Property is currently zoned mixed use. Next slide there, sure. You can see it here on the screen. That is, it is a couple parcels, all zoned mixed use presently, just there on the north side. I have a PDD on the adjacent there to the west and east. These are a couple photos of the site. It doesn't do full justice of the whole site there, give it its size. The top photos are both just looking north towards the property from Fort Mill Highway, as well as the one at the bottom left. One at the bottom right is looking east, subject property from Wedgwood Lane, which is in the Rosemont area. It's a stub out that would connect into this development. So they would join into that existing street network. UDO section 9.2.9B9 sets forth certain criteria that all master plans would need to meet in order to be approved. Among those is consistency with the comprehensive plan. All mixed-use development shall be designed, constructed, and maintained in conformance with applicable guidelines and standards established by the Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan. The future land use category on the subject property is neighborhood mixed use, which is established as have the possibility of several land use considerations representing typical development in that category. Among the single-family attached homes, townhomes, duplexes, single-family detached homes, these are all condominiums, apartments, are all considered to be consistent with that land use category. Another one of the criteria is the integration with the transportation system. The mixed-use development shall be designed to integrate into the adjacent transportation system, so relative to certain criteria. The master development plan will have both vehicular and pedestrian connections onto Fort Mill Highway, as well as Wedgwood Lane, as we referenced before. Proposed streets have been designed consistent with the requirements of the UDO and have made use of the existing street stub out. However, no viable opportunities do exist to provide additional stub outs from the property to other adjacent properties. Impact on infrastructure is that the development is staged in a manner that allows for facilities and the timely provision of public utilities, facilities, and services. The Lancaster County Water and Sewer District has reviewed the proposed master development plan. They've commented there's a high probability downstream sewer infrastructure would need to be upsized to handle the additional flow this development will generate onto the system. They did recommend having a project engineer submit flow data to the Lancaster Water and Sewer District's engineering department to better understand what infrastructure would need to be upsized or modified. I do understand the applicant has been working toward resolving this issue. They are here this evening. They may be able to provide you with additional information on that. That item was made a condition of approval from Planning Commission previously. Compatibility of uses and structures is another item for mixed-use developments. So the mixed-use development is planned so that land uses and densities create an appropriate transition to existing or planned uses and densities on adjoining properties. The surrounding uses to the north, the east, and west are all primarily single-family detached dwellings. The proposed residential uses along the perimeter of the proposed master development plan, being townhomes, cottage core building types, are compatible with these single-family detached dwellings. The more intense aspect of the proposed development, being the garden apartments, those will be located towards the center of the property and will be buffered by the townhouse and the cottage core buildings from the surrounding single-family detached dwellings. Head here. Some of the other criteria that come up in there is housing diversity is to be required within the district. There are at least two different residential types, attached, detached, multifamily, or two-family, with a range of prices and sizes shall be incorporated into the development. As previously noted, there are 80 townhomes, 60 cottage court units, and 74 garden apartments. So there actually would be providing 3 rather than the required 2. That can go to the next slide there. The applicant did have 2 community meetings with regards to this. The first coming September 8th of last year, and then second on October the 29th, both at the Pleasant Hill United Methodist Church. There was some concern expressed to the proximity of the proposed development with the rear property lines. Developers have addressed that with the individuals. They also discussed provide a better pedestrian connection between the proposed development and the commercial development to the southwest. The developer has been looking into solving that. They have come in a couple obstacles that may preclude them from doing that exactly as maybe that was envisioned. They can certainly discuss that with you if need be. In the next slide there, Sherry. Thank you. Staff did recommend approval of this request, subject to conditions. Planning Commission's meeting back on December 15th. They did recommend approval unanimously, 7-0, to recommend approval of the item subject to those same conditions, which are there on that slide. A couple of those I've referenced to you already this evening. I'm available if you have any questions, and of course the applicant is here as well.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Hunter.
Did you have a traffic impact study done on what this is going to do to the traffic on 160, which is already generating more traffic than it can handle, even though it's been reworked?
Yeah, there was a traffic impact analysis that was originally conducted for the subject property by Kimley Horn back in the end of 2019. That was based upon a different project configuration at that time. Since then, they have Kimley Horn has updated it back September 4th, based upon the current iteration of the project. Let's see, I had a document on that. Here we go. That was reviewed by our consultants. Let's see here. Now, they did look at that, and they did provide some recommendations, I believe, here. The study indicates that the northbound approach of Old Bales to SC 160 should be marked to provide a separate right turn lane with 150 feet of storage. This configuration currently exists, but will be changed to a single approach lane when SC 160 widening project is completed. Report recommends coordination with SCDOT to discuss amending the SC 160 widening plans to provide separate right and left turn lanes on Old Bales Road. Although they are in agreement with the recommendation, it appears the proposed pavement width for Old Bales Road on the 160 widening plans may need to be increased to accommodate that additional lane. I believe that was the only change that they had recommended.
Have you got with SCDOT yet to talk about this?
I've not heard
Turn
anything
lanes and so
specifically from
forth.
them with regards to this. The applicant may be able to shed a little bit more light on that.
So, how many apartments will you have? Total apartments, how many will you have?
In this project here?
Yeah.
I believe the number was
217.
74 garden apartments.
217 total.
Well, you've got different breakdowns.
So
Yeah.
probably put 400
They're all
more
for
cars
rental though. All the
maybe
units are
coming.
for rental, so it's just a different style, but it's 217 in total.
Probably 400 plus cars coming out onto the highway then when built out.
Essentially.
Or more.
Mr. Tiff, could you elaborate for us what the current maximum dwelling units per acre that are allowed on the property? Not what's shown here, but what would be allowed under mixed use?
MX. Top of my head, I want to say. I don't have that in front of me to recollect, but I want to say it's 8.
That
If
was
not
my,
higher.
that was my thoughts, is either 8 to 10.
Yeah. I don't have the specific number there, but it's at least 8, and they're at 5.6 with this proposal. They're well under what they would have been regardless of that.
Mr. Tiff, mixed use, is it not supposed to be, in planning parlance, if you will, residential, various residential as we have here, but at the same time, maybe a retail component? I just recently went up above Concord, well, I'll say recently, within the last couple of months, and saw just a wonderful retail integrated into some single-family dwellings, townhome dwellings, and things of that nature. Are we ever going to have a development like that in Lancaster? Or are we just going to always just jam a bunch of apartments in one area, jam a bunch of homes in one area, and not integrate it? We talk about walkability, and you're
Sure.
kind of forcing it, well, not you, this is not directed at you, mind you.
Understood.
This development is forcing it to go to the existing commercial on the southwest side instead of having it integrated into part of the plan. Are we ever going to see a plan like that in Lancaster, or are we just going to just be the scum of the earth?
That would certainly be wonderful. Like I said, our UDO doesn't require that configuration of what you're speaking of. When it comes to mixed use, it only requires a mix of residential types. Mixed use, though, typically in my experience, has been a mix of residential and commercial.
Why don't we have,
Residential and non-residential, at least.
why don't we have UDO amendments to facilitate that, to make sure that we're going to grow Lancaster County to be something that's,
That is in part of with the UDO amendments or updates that we are looking at and presently waiting to have a outside consultant be hired to help with that. That would be something that we would look at, having come up with some of that.
You know, I was, when we approved the MX districts, I always assumed that you were required to have a commercial element. And I agree with Mr. Blackman. I know we've got a consultant looking at one. We've looked at one, and that was a year ago. I would like to make an amendment to the UDO instead of whatever the language is in here, recommending a commercial element, that it be mandated. And I would like to see something written up and presented to the planning commission within the next month or two. Because this is not mixed-use district. This is not what we all envisioned it being, is a glorified apartment complex. So I'll be talking with Mr. Willis and have him talk to staff to come up, and I will propose the amendment myself. Anyone else would like to sign on with me, I'd be happy for them too.
Well, I think it's a great idea, but I saw Steve's eyes sort of get big there. So what's the legal ramifications, Steve, if that happens?
That's one I would definitely want to talk with Rox and John DeBose about. You know, a PDD, absolutely, state law mandates that there will be either a commercial or industrial component. Mixed use generally does not. It basically talks about you could have a variety of uses within an area, but not necessarily every parcel has to have a mixture of uses. And that's one, you know, we can certainly take a look at it, and that, you know, message has been received. We'll go ahead and take a look at that. I just don't want there to be an expectation that it's just a simple matter of saying, okay, MX is going to require multiple uses on the same parcel. I'm not sure that's going to be allowable, but we'll certainly research it.
Can we get a legal, point, get the legal point of view on that?
Yeah, Daniel, would you address that?
I mean, unfortunately, I think you're going to be disappointed in my answer, which is same as what Steve said. It's going to take a little research. When you already have an established zoning in your ordinance and your UDO of what MX is, and these people are conforming with the use, now you're getting into changing people's zoning. So it's going to be a bit of a complicated matter,
Okay.
just like when we tried to unravel some of the MX stuff recently with all the rezonings that came through. So.
Now, is that something if we're not able to do it, is that something particular we need to look at when we're updating our UDO?
It's definitely something we can look at. It's just I don't want to give you an opinion on it without having a chance to research it, because it does get into this issue of they already have an MX zoning. You have that defined in your UDO, and now you're changing the definition of the zoning category.
No, I don't think that's what the chairman meant. What he meant was for future MX. Right now, this one stands on its own merit. I don't think anybody's trying to change the rules.
Right, but there is land that is zoned MX right now that hasn't been developed. And
Right.
if you change the definition in the UDO, you're changing the,
When we rewrote the
Zoning of that
UDO, we did exactly what you're talking about.
no, so it's possible. I'm just saying I'd like to do a little more research before I give you.
I understand. All right, thank you.
I'll make sure John knows.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question to
Go
get back,
ahead.
to get back on this track here. I want to know if the recommendations the planning commission made are in the resolution.
Which resolution?
On this, this approval of this master plan.
Or are they incorporated into the drawings?
I want to know if it's in there. I mean, is it in writing in there? I mean,
It's
are they
not
going to
in-
have to do it? You already referenced and said that they might not be able to do the pedestrian one, but that's a recommendation that there is a pedestrian crossing between the commercial and the residential, which makes perfect sense because we want to encourage people to walk. I mean, that's part of what a mixed use is for, is walkability.
Yeah, I think the applicant can elaborate on this a little bit more. From my recollection from reading some things is that there's some great issues in being able to make that connection. They can certainly provide a connection, obviously, via the public sidewalk, but one directly between the two parcels for some great issues is problematic from there.
Problematic because it costs too much or because it's too steep a grade?
I want to say too steep of a grade, but the applicant can certainly elaborate on that for you.
Well, I mean, before I vote on it, I want to know if these recommendations on the planning commission are going to be put in place, because I would make the same
Okay,
recommendations.
would you like to speak on that? Come on, just
Well,
give us your
before-
name and address.
Let's answer Mr. Graham's question. If you pull up the resolution there in our packet, you'll see the bold print in the first paragraph. The second paragraph mentions these things here.
Okay. I wasn't as good a detective as you, but I also wanted to hear that verbally as well.
Yes, yes.
All right, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the consideration tonight. I want to clarify a couple of things related to the MX zoning district and the density. I believe it actually allows up to 15 units per acre, and the property owner, who we are in the process of acquiring the site from, had a previous plan that I think had gone through sketch plan approval for up to 455 units. So we're less than half of what was originally contemplated. And that factors into the traffic. I think we'll be generating significantly less traffic than what the previous plan contemplated. Regarding the pedestrian connection, we are all in favor of it. We love the fact that we are going to be adjacent to a pizza place and a new brewery, some service type offerings right there as well. In addition, which our engineer is here and he can speak to the technical challenges of making it directly where the parking lot is. I will tell you that it's not just the technical difficulties, but that's also where they have their trash located for the retail. And so we'd have to figure out how to relocate trash and make that connection. It's just not a great connection there. However, we do have public sidewalks as well as sidewalks through the neighborhood that we'll connect to. And so while it's not as directly convenient, I do think we'll still have some good walkability at this development.
Okay, but so it is possible to have a direct, if you wanted to, you could do it, but you would have to, you'd have to get the trash collection sites moved, I guess.
This is Jake Bachman. I'll let him speak to more of the additional challenges, but the trash is one.
Yeah, to answer your question, it is possible to do a direct connection, and we can do that through a couple of different ways. But one of the things we're trying to be cognizant of is ADA access and not putting too many stairs in that location directly adjacent to the commercial. We feel like we can route the ADA access up to the highway and connect better to the commercial development in that area. But we can look at adding stairs in that location as well.
All right. Any more questions for developers? All right, thank y'all. Appreciate it. All right, any more questions for staff? We do have a public hearing, but no one signed up, so we will move beyond that. And I'm looking for a motion to bring this resolution to the floor.
So moved.
Motion for Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Carnes.
Based solely on the fact that this is a downgrading of the maximum density for the property.
Okay. Any discussion?
No, but it is important to note it is, it is a downgrading, and they're not doing as much as they can, but I would really like to saw that pedestrian crossing.
Any more questions? Okay, we have a motion to approve Resolution 1137-R2021. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? The motion passes 6 for and 1 against. Let's move on to 8F, second reading of ordinance 2021-1699 regarding the potential transfer of county property to the Council on Aging. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Mosteller, second for Mr. Carnes. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, this is coming back to you, second reading. This is the ordinance that would transfer parcel of property to Council on Aging for development of a parking facility that would be a joint use facility with both Parks and Recreation as well as Council on Aging. Only real change tonight, you have the proposed deed in front of you. You have the proposed site plan that was presented as well. I would note that John is working on a memorandum of understanding with Council on Aging so we can lock down exact hours that Council on Aging would be utilizing the facility. The balance of the time would be available for use by Parks and Recreation. Other than that, no change from first reading and would recommend approval.
Any questions?
Will we be able to get a pedestrian crossway there? With it? Is that an SCDOT
So
highway?
that's state secondary road. We can certainly ask for one, but it's DOT. We'd have to get an encroachment permit to do that. Yes, sir.
I think for the number of people that would be crossing the road, that would be a must-have.
Yes, sir.
Last meeting, I asked for a site plan, and I'm well pleased with what's there now and what this is. It's 1,000 times better.
Yes, sir. Would note that in the proposed deed that you will note section 4, there's a reversionary clause that we discussed at first reading. If the property ever ceases to be used for parking or if they don't develop it within a certain time frame, reverts back to Lancaster County.
I think that was 18 months, wasn't it? They have to.
I don't know what the time frame would be.
I think that's what came before us at INR.
They have to get the grants to do that,
approved,
so
right.
I just don't know. We have 18 months in there. If they're working and it takes a little while longer, I think council would probably be amenable to a change, but that's what we have in there right now, 18 months.
All right, any more discussion? Thank you. We have a motion for approval of second read of ordinance 2021-1699 from Mr. Mosteller. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8G, second reading of ordinance 2021-1700 regarding rezoning property located at 7907 Henry Harris Road. Applicant is Ryan Urban. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to bring it to the floor. That's the,
Have a motion for Mr. Graham. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second for Mr. Blackman. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hey,
All right, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Go
So,
ahead.
thank you. As you may note, I am not Rox, who presented the first time on this item, but I am here to follow up on information from the first discussion at the January 11th council meeting. So, of course, a lot of the discussion had to do with access, access through the easement that was granted from the Helms family to give access to this property. So I just want to go highlight with the PowerPoint. Thank you. So again, this property is located at 7907 Henry Harris Road. It's currently zoned low-density residential, and the requested zoning district is rural neighborhood. The applicant is Ryan Urban, and the property is approximately 19 acres in size. The existing commercial stable is considered a non-conforming use in the existing low-density residential district. It would be considered a permitted use in the requested rural neighborhood district, but of course the applicant would have to go through the permitting process. Should the request be approved, then a commercial stable would be permissible, subject to compliance with the UDO. Again, for site access, the existing easement is 20 feet wide, and the gravel driveway is approximately 15 feet wide. It is about 15 feet closest to Henry Harris Road, and then it seems to get a little bit wider as you go back toward the stable property. The length of the easement is 690 feet. The fire marshal, I spoke with the fire marshal in between the last meeting and this meeting. The site has been accessed by emergency vehicles previously, certainly as indicated by the Helms family, and he would recommend widening the gravel drive area to 20 feet wide, which would be the width of the pavement. He would recommend looking into additional parking further into the stable property in order to reduce conflicts with the driveway and the easement. So I did speak with the applicant's attorney about that, and they have taken that into consideration, and they've identified a potential site location where some overflow parking could be. Just want to point out that should that business be expanded in the future, whether that's to increase the services that would increase traffic there or add an additional building, then at that time they may look to consider widening the driveway to 22 feet. Thank you. Of course, here's the location map. The subject property is highlighted in teal. Again, you can see this property does extend from Henry Harris down to Jim Wilson Road. I have two slides of location photos for you. The first slide shows if you're looking exactly at the property site. So this, you can see the yellow sign in the top left. That's the sign posted on the property across the road. That's the construction easement for Harris Mill. And then, of course, there are photos looking southwest and then also south. So you're looking along Henry Harris Road. Okay, so these photos show the property from the access point as it stands today, which again is through an easement. So the first photo is looking south along the easement with Henry Harris Road to your back. The photo in the top right is looking north along the easement toward Henry Harris Road. So again, that's as if you are standing at the stable property and you're looking down the easement toward Henry Harris. Bottom left is the stable and a mobile home, and of course this is the existing parking area. And then also included a photo from the access, so where they take access to the property, which is the 20-foot easement. And again, this is on Henry Harris Road. Okay, so again, focusing on the rezoning request, the property is surrounded by properties that are zoned rural neighborhood, low-density residential, and medium-density residential. The rural neighborhood and medium-density residential districts are located across Henry Harris Road, and that is consistent with the surrounding area. For the comprehensive plan, the future land use category is neighborhood mixed use with a community type of suburban single-family neighborhood. And so the oh dear, sorry, there's a typo. The proposed district is consistent with the neighborhood mixed use future land use category. Okay, staff recommends approval of this request. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this request at their November 17th meeting. And then, of course, again, this is the second reading for this item. It did come before you on the January 11th meeting. Again, as I stated, I hope I'm here with the information that you were looking for, hopefully to help address any outstanding questions that you had. So I just want to summarize again that the existing easement is 20 feet wide. Again, the gravel driveway is approximately 15 feet wide. In speaking with the fire marshal, he would recommend widening the gravel drive to 20 feet wide, so that would match the easement. That is something that the applicant said, well, the applicant and their attorney, they are looking into the cost of that. I know they are here tonight, so I'm sure they would like to speak to this as well. Let's see, sorry. Okay, so of course, one concern, of course, is when there is an emergency, how is access? Is that going to be a problem? So the fire marshal said that there is sufficient turnaround on the Helms property. So again, the Helms property is the one that granted the easement. You're ready, Sherry. So I do want to refer you to, you do have a copy of the boundary survey within your packet. If you want to refer to that, that is on page 281. Again, that shows the easement in relation to the Helms property, and then certainly the subject property. So again, the Helms property, the property in the back, does have sufficient access according to the fire marshal. When there's a limited number of vehicles on the site for the stable, turnaround is sufficient there according to the fire marshal. But of course, the challenge would be is if there's an event going on and you have a lot of vehicles there, how would you be able to turn around? So in speaking with the fire marshal and then also speaking with the applicant, that's when we discussed the potential for overflow parking. So they've identified an area just a bit further behind the stables where they believe they could put some overflow parking. Okay, I think that's everything. Again, of course, I do want to state that, this is the rezoning request, so if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer that. And then again, if you have any additional questions about access, certainly please let me know. The applicant did take a video. I see Ms. Sherry has pulled this up. This video, and the applicant may have a bit more to add. I don't want to steal their thunder. So this is standing on the gravel driveway or the easement, and it's looking toward Henry Harris Road, and they want to demonstrate how these two vehicles are able to pass one another. I can sense your excitement. Okay, do y'all have any questions for me? Or, again, I do want to remind you that
How
the
many
applicant is
animals
here.
will you have? I'm talking horses in your stable or barn.
You know what? That is a question I'd be happy to defer to
You
the
may have said
applicant.
that earlier, and I just couldn't hear it.
I did not, no, sir. Would you like to speak to that, Ryan?
There's 15 stalls. Good evening. There's 15 stalls. It's a small operation that, there's one arena, that you could have 2 horses riding at a time, maybe 3, because typically it's ponies there, and giving lessons. And so it's, in the 2 years that we've owned it, or nearly 2 years that we've owned it, we've never had more than a handful of people there. If there was going to be some kind of a small event, we have a spot where we could designate excess parking, overflow parking back behind the barn. And we've never had an instance where we haven't been able to have all parties for our location to be able to park on our property.
Will you allow boarding of other people's horses in your facility?
Yes, sir. So the idea is to be able to have a tenant there that would operate like lessons, or have people that are boarding on there, and then they can come and ride their horse, and then the tenant would be.
What will be your max allowed in your facility? Animals I'm talking about.
Well, for stalled animals, there would be a max of 15. You could maybe put 3 or 4 more in the pastures as pasture board, but there really isn't any more space allowable other than that.
Thank you very much.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Ms. McGrath.
Katie, are those recommendations made by the fire marshal, are they binding within a certain period, within a time frame?
Well, of course, that would be, so should you all approve the rezoning request tonight, and that opens up the possibility for them to seek approval of a commercial stable on this property, as it would be zoned rural neighborhood, then yes, ma'am, it does sound like that's what we are going to be looking to require, because certainly we want to make sure that safety is not an issue. Again, you do have the 20-foot easement there. It looks like, again, further back from the driveway, it already does exceed 15 feet in width, so it does not appear to be a challenge. And again, I don't know, it looks like the applicant's attorney may have a bit more to add based on what they found. So certainly this would be one of the items that we would be looking into when it would be time to permit and certainly sign off on this as a permitted use. Does that help?
Yes, yes.
I got a question for.
Go ahead.
When you have changes to the rezoning like what we're doing here, does that not change any of the ingress and egress like it does anything else that we do, or just like you're doing a traffic impact, far as?
Well, we are somewhat limited. Certainly, this is an existing use. The site layout as it exists, they are not looking to expand upon it. We're kind of looking, again, we're kind of looking at the fact that back in the 90s, when it came into use as a stable, again, that zoning district did permit it, but it appears that has lapsed, which is why this is here before you today. And again, it just seems to be a logistical challenge, Again, in the 90s, the property owners did grant the easement here, and so we're trying to stay within the confines of that. Does that help a little bit?
So you said that the use lapsed. What do you mean by that, and what was the time frame, and what was the dates?
Well, I don't know the exact dates of that. I can tell you that it became a commercial stable in about the mid-90s, and from what I have gathered, because this came to our attention as a result of a zoning violation, so this is why we are looking to rectify this and help bring this forward to, again, be a permitted use. Again, a stable would be a permitted use in the zoning district they are requesting. I believe it looks like the time period, it may have ceased to be actively used for about 2 years, but I know the applicant's attorney certainly has different information he would like to provide on that, but that's what we're trying to look into.
The zoning changed when the new UDO went into
Yeah,
effect.
Thank you.
And it was not being operated at that time, so the grandfathered period expired.
Thank you, Mr. Carnes. I meant to add that fact.
Okay, so it's not a grandfathered use, it's a rezoning.
Yeah, it was
Yes,
a
sir.
grandfathered use, but it expired, so now you gotta rezone to bring it into compliance.
Okay, now I wanted to clear that point up.
Thank you.
There was, last meeting, there was some talk about, what about a second entrance? But I'm looking at the parcel, and it looks like there's water,
Yes.
and it would be impossible for the owner.
It would be quite the challenge, yes, sir. They would need to cross the creek at least once, and doing that at least once could be quite a significant cost. So, yes, sir. So, again, kind of speaking to what you were talking about, this seems to be what we have dealt, the cards we've been dealt. So, we do have an easement available to us, and we're trying to see how we can stay within that and find, again, some solutions that work. And so, one solution, again, that we have before us is widening the gravel driveway, and then also hopefully looking for some overflow parking locations so that when vehicles, especially these trucks and the horse trailers are parked, they are not in conflict with taking access. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Dan Ballou from 417 Windsor Terrace in Rock Hill. And I was before you last meeting and wanted again to remind y'all the history of this, and that we are not asking for any expansion or change in the use. It is just to come in conformance with the existing UDO. And again, this property was designed and built 25 years ago as a horse facility. We have not expanded it since then. The prior owners haven't expanded it. It's operated continuously up through the time of the last UDO change. And Councilman Carnes, you're absolutely correct that, and y'all probably recall that when we adopted the UDO, there were parcels that had been designated in certain districts, and you gave folks an opportunity to come and ask to make sure that the UDO designation matched up with their current use. We cannot explain why the prior owner didn't come before you to get that corrected. It is, in our view, an oversight. And that at that point in time, it became a non-conforming use, even though it continued to be used as a horse facility and boarding and lessons. And this is not the kind of facility that really is designed to host events, per se. This is a facility where people come and get riding lessons, and they bring their kids to learn how to ride horses. And that it's a very low impact as far as equestrian facilities go. It's not, there are no grandstands or any kind of public address facility, anything like that. This is as low impact as these kinds of things come. But the timeline caught up with them. And so when my client decided that he wanted to explore the possibility of selling this to somebody else, at that point in time, the horses that he had boarded there and that he had rented a space to decided to move their horses to other facilities. And we are not here arguing this, the grandfathered status. We actually have a different view of that, and hopefully we don't have to litigate that or resolve that in front of the zoning board or whatever. But with staff, we came up with a solution. Let's just get the zoning corrected and come before y'all and get things put back to where they were before the UDO got us out of whack. And so all we're asking is that we come into compliance with the zoning ordinance, that we allow this property to continue as it's been used for 25 years. When the original developers created this use, they obtained the easement from the Helms. We are willing to explore the expansion by adding more gravel to this to make it so it's a even more width for vehicles to come in and out within the confines of that easement. But we only have 20 feet of that easement recorded, and that's what we're stuck with. But that's what we think we can work with, and we've worked with the fire marshal to make sure that complies with their expectations and requirements. We've designated for additional parking in the site, get trucks and vehicles away from that entrance So if there is some unfortunate event where an EMS has to come in and help somebody, there's no problem with them coming in and getting access to where they need to be. So, like I said, we're here to try to get things back on track. We will go through the development process and under the development regs and make sure that we comply with all the existing regs for access for this. But tonight, what we're asking for is for just for the zoning to be corrected in our mind to allow this use to continue.
Yeah, the thing that gives me a little heartache or heartburn about rezonings and what you're describing is very nice, but when we rezone it as RN, it's rezoned RN, and all the uses that are allowed in that zoning district can be put there. So you don't have to stay the way you are. I mean, you could do whatever RN says you can do.
Well, that's correct, and I mean, as it stands right now, I suppose we could use whatever we could put in the light, the LDR or LDN category.
Yes, you can, but it might not be as stable.
Well, it might not be stable, it might be something more intense, might not, but that's not what we're asking to do. And I think,
I understand.
the RN designation is very similar to what we have currently, with the exception of the stable use. And that's really the one difference. And, if you notice from the zoning map, this whole area is kind of dotted with RN and LDN and all this kind of similar light, rural or transitional kinds of residential or complementary uses.
Yeah, there's a fair sprinkling of MDR.
That's right, a few of those. But
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
You do have the legal easement and everything. We've had a lot of tough things tonight to deal with, and this to me is one of the toughest, because we got a neighbor here and a neighbor here, and we all want everybody to get along. So my question is, what's the probability that this easement would get blocked up by your client if EMS needed to get to the next door neighbor who granted the original easement anyway? Is there, it might have been addressed last time. I'm just having a hard time remembering if anything was said. Are we putting them at jeopardy? The easement's there, I know that, so you understand. But by allowing this rezoning, thus this use, is there any kind of significant probability that we're blocking their property with this use from someone like EMS or fire?
I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's any evidence that our vehicles have blocked the easement area that has somehow interfered with access to that property. I think there may be some concerns about turnaround coming onto our property if you have to turn around and make a three-point turn. But as you can see from the video, there is room there. And I don't think that there is any evidence. We've certainly not been there when any of our folks have, for instance, been sitting in that easement. They haven't parked their trailers or stopped there in that easement. But I know that the Helms have raised some concerns about things that, frankly, we weren't there. We don't know what that was about. We're really at a disadvantage as to what the problem is there. But we are making every accommodation we know to avoid that. And we certainly don't want and we'll instruct our customers and our boarders that you can't stop, you can't block that access, because somebody else needs to be able to use that at all times. So that's certainly in our interest, and we want to be good neighbors just like everybody else. So.
Okay.
Maybe no parking signs along that little road would help.
I think that's probably a great idea.
And I would note that video we saw was on a dry day. I bet today that those ditches are pretty messy, and I wouldn't want to get in them, because it's a wet area anyway. It's along the creek there.
All right, let's keep this moving. This might be a little unusual, but we did let the applicant. I'll give you a minute to.
First of all, we've already been blocked once. I told y'all that. You weren't here. I'm glad you're better. And I think you were on the phone. But we have already been blocked. The pictures that they're showing they're showing the part of the widest part of the driveway that has been increased from the use of the prior owner. When we gave them an easement, it was a little, I don't know, my husband could tell you the measurements, I'm not sure. But as the property has been used, the driveway has widened, and now we are getting into the lower ditches. When they showed the video, they didn't show the grass that they went into and the rut that it made that very day. I went down and took pictures. I should have brought them, but anyway, that's the one thing I want to address. Parts of the driveway are wider than the others, but going into my driveway, you cannot get two vehicles to pass there. We've almost had accidents with family because it's so narrow and there's a curve there. So getting to our driveway is a problem. And we've already been blocked by a backhoe that came to bury a horse that had passed. I think I told y'all that last time. The other thing I wanted to address was events. They've already had events. When they opened the farm back up in September, sometime, I think it might have been, I'm not sure, but they had a small children's camp for small children to learn how to ride. I consider that an event. I'm sure they'll have summer camps for children. I called Elaine on that. That's over in, I'm not sure what department, but I sent her pictures of that camp being advertised on Facebook. So they've already had events, or an event. To say how many horses he's going to allow, I don't think that's a fair question, because as the business grows, when's he going to say enough's enough? This is no reflection of them, but Miss Cannon had as many as 40 horses on that property once she got acquired the other 14-something acres. So I don't think he can honestly answer that question because he doesn't know how the business is going to grow. With all the growth on Henry Harris Road, all these new developments coming in, people are going to look for something for their children to do, and I don't blame them, but the business is going to grow. It's out there, so. I just needed to address that, and I appreciate you letting me come back up and say that. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. We've heard all the discussion. I think we're going to hear from the applicant and the neighbor. So any questions or concerns up here? You know, I'm looking at this, and it is an easement, and he does have property that touches the road, but it would have to go across a creek at least twice, and it looks like it would be, what, a quarter of a mile or farther. And I'm concerned, you know, this has been a continued use apparently for 25 years. I don't think nobody's denied that. And so I would be favorable to what's presented. Anybody else want to make a comment?
Chairman, I would like to see a drawing of where this proposed additional parking is going to be on the property.
I can show you that. May I approach you?
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it around.
You want to see it?
Parking area, here's the mobile home, of course there's structure, and they're showing that the parking could go back here. So again, there's easement going to the Helms property, and overflow parking could be here.
How do you access this part of the property here?
Where would they have access to it?
Okay, right here is a pathway that full truck and trailer fits in many, many times. When we had even construction done on like light grading type stuff to be able to put the path in 2 years ago, we were able to get pulled back there. You can bring a full-size truck and trailer all the way in the back and even turn around in our arena. And so right here would be a perfect spot for us to be able to gravel in and allow us overflow parking.
All right, thank you.
Ms. McGriff, you good?
I'm good.
Any more discussion or questions? I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, like I said, no more discussion in before you, you have second reading of ordinance 2021-1700. You have a motion for approval from Mr. Graham. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? The motion carries 4-3 for second reading. So it will be on the consent agenda. Was there any questions, anything staff, you would want staff to bring back to you?
I would like to see that drawing that they showed Brian. I mean, I think that in that parking and all of that, but I'd like to see it in a packet. I mean, yeah, put it, that's all I need to say is for next week.
I would like to know a little bit more about possibly widen, upgrade gravel or whatever to closer to 20 foot. I know you can't go all the way to 20 probably, but.
Mr. Chair, if it's possible that, if it's a lot of parking in that driveway, if we could get pictures of that, because I can understand people with horses and the trailer to pick them up, it could get pretty crowded in there. We haven't seen it. The houses, the neighbor beside the stable is seeing all this. We're not. So I would love to see a visual picture of trailers up there with horses, because I don't think we're getting the full picture of it.
All right. Thank y'all. Let's move on down to 8H.
This will be on the non-consent agenda.
Yeah, definitely. Public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2021-1706 regarding rezoning property owned by Billy Coker from MDR to RR. Ms. Katie say?
Yes, sir. Thank you again. Okay. All right, Ms. Sherry. Thank you. So the request before you tonight is to rezone approximately 2.25 acres of property. The property is currently zoned medium-density residential, and the applicant is requesting to go to the rural residential district. The property is located on the south side of Mahaffey Line Drive, and it's across from the intersection with Memorial Drive. The request before you to rezone the property is so the applicant could put a manufactured home on the property. The area is characterized by single-family homes as well as some manufactured homes, and the property is surrounded by MDR zone property. Here you have a location map showing the existing zoning. The subject property is shown outlined in teal, and of course it is currently zoned medium-density residential, as is all the property immediately surrounding it. Again, even though the properties surrounding it are also zoned medium-density residential, you do also have some manufactured homes. Those are considered non-conforming uses because certainly they were there, they preceded the zoning district in place, but want to point that out.
Any questions for the say?
I do want to
But it is the only RR district, appears to be the only RR district.
Yes, sir. That's correct. So I do want to point out that Ms. Ashley showed you here in her PowerPoint presentation the measurement of the closest mobile homes. So you can see the proximity of those to this lot where the proposed new mobile home could go. Next slide.
Go ahead. This location is in my district.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to vote in favor of what the Planning Commission recommended, simply because if you go over in that area, it's mobile homes over there. Double wide will probably accent the community, because if you go down Mahaffey Line, it's mobile homes all the way down that road. A lot of those houses over there are really old houses. And if you go on down Mahaffey Line and Memorial Park Road, most of the houses are old. As I said, we've got mobile homes there. I've walked that road so many times. So I can't vote in favor of what the staff is recommending, because to me, that's a prime location for a double wide. I went out there today and I just could not understand the recommendations other than, I guess, you're meeting the UDO.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with Ms. McGriff. Affordability or affordable housing is really getting to be a problem. And this area, I think it would be an improvement.
It would.
Any more questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
No, except we
have
ought to
no-
figure out how to make the rest of them RR then, if that's what we're gonna do, because that's partly, that they shouldn't be MDR or LDR. Is that right, Charlie?
Yeah, and I couldn't understand it because when I got over there today, I'm saying this is, as Steve said, you're looking for affordable housing. All the housing in that area is either dilapidated old houses, and I would much rather move it into a double wide than one of the houses over in that area. Because first of all, you probably got to do so much to improve the housing in that area. Not that they keep the yards good and keep it the best they
Yeah.
can, but I couldn't see why another mobile home, especially a double wide, wouldn't be a good fit for that area.
Yeah, I was just making a comment that the surrounding area ought to be that RR to allow mobile homes to be there,
Yes,
so they're
yes.
not a non-conforming use.
Yes.
All right, we had a public hearing, but no one signed up. So we will move past our public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
So moved.
Have a motion for Mr. Honeycutt. Have a second?
Second.
Bring it
Second?
Bring it to a vote.
Second for Mr. Graham. Any more discussion? We have a motion on the floor for approval of first reading of orders 2021-1706. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Now, let me clarify that. Are we voting for the staff recommendation or the?
No, we have a motion for, wait a minute. You're right.
Get it right.
I need to, we got a motion to approve the rezoning.
Yes, sir.
That's what the motion will be.
In this situation, you have a staff recommendation. The planning commission chose not to accept that recommendation and recommended a different course of action. As council, y'all receive your recommendations on rezoning from the planning commission. So a affirmative vote on this would be to approve the rezoning as recommended by the planning
Okay.
commission.
That was my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
what I thought. Any more discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of first reading of ordinance 2021-1706. Go down to our appointments by me, Catawba Regional Council of Government. I will remain on that board. Ms. McGriff, she does a great job on that board. A lot of what the COG does are grants or really affect the city of Lancaster and her district. And she's very active and does a great job. I would ask, she will go on there. And our RFATs, Mr. Carnes will stay on that board. And we will move, we've already discussed Edgewater. Let's go down to 9C, request to utilize construction manager at risk method for the detention center, Magistrates Court complex. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, in order to get started on the detention center magistrates court complex, a couple of preliminary things have to happen. Number one, we have to determine what methodology we want to deliver the proposed facility. I would refer you to section 2-273 of the county code. That particular section authorizes 3 different types of delivery. You can either do traditional design, bid, build, you can do design, build, or you can do construction manager at risk. Talking with Franny Heiser, Franny could not be here tonight, but if council has any questions on this, she's more than happy to be here at the next meeting. For major projects, you generally see construction manager at risk around the state. We've used it previously for the county courthouse, worked quite well. So recommending that we utilize construction manager at risk. Again, if anybody has any, questions from the attorney side, Franny works with major projects throughout the state of South Carolina. She's going to recommend CMR at risk. But if you want to hear from her, we can certainly have her here at the next meeting. Would tell you the key thing I like about construction manager at risk is you have a guaranteed maximum price, and that served us well at the county courthouse. When you have major projects, one of the things, if you do traditional design bid build, you can hit cost overruns. Depending on what you hit, there can be major cost overruns. Don't have that with CMAR. You have your guaranteed maximum price. The one caveat on there I would note, change orders from the owner fall outside that guaranteed maximum price. So, with that caveat, the GMP. Second thing, this was the one project on capital project sales tax that the voters approved we would bond. Everything else is pay-go. This particular project is going to be bonded. Would request permission to go ahead and contact Franny, utilize Burr Foreman to handle the bonds. They do all of our bonds. Certainly would look for them to do that. As we move forward on this, I feel sure Franny's going to be doing multiple briefings to council. I would fully anticipate we would use SCAGO for the bonding, and that is something, a similar procedure we used on the county courthouse. Veronica is very familiar with that. Actually was the, I think you were our trustee for the county courthouse. And again, it's part of the financing mechanism with the bonds. But would request permission to go ahead and at least get Franny turned loose on that. One of the first things we have to do is she will draft a reimbursement resolution, because there will be expenses we will incur prior to the bonds being issued. And what that does is allows us to recoup whatever we spend, whether it be site analysis, phase one environmentals, whatever it may be, we can recoup that whenever the bonds are issued, if we have the reimbursement resolution. And we anticipate Franny bringing that back one of the meetings in February. The second thing is requesting permission to go ahead and work with Franny to get an RFQ. Now, this is a request for qualifications, not a request for proposals, because when you're doing professional design work, when you're architects, engineers, things like that, state law doesn't allow you to do what you're going to charge us. You have to do requests for qualifications, who gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling. But again, to work with Franny to develop an RFQ for the owner's representative. That's going to be the key component moving forward. I'll be first to tell you, I'm not going to stand here and try to tell you, here's where we think it ought to go, here's the timeline we're looking at. I don't speak construction. We have an owner's representative, somebody that speaks construction. That's going to be the key person to get on board. And that's the beauty with the construction manager at risk. You have the owner's representative who's heavily involved, and you have the architect and the general contractor selected. Once you have the owner's representative, you make sure everybody's working well. One of the classic examples, Councilman Honeycutt, I know you'll recall, BE&K Construction. As we were doing the design work, Stevens Wilkinson was doing design, and one of the things they ran across was the retaining wall in the lower area where the detention facility is located. BE&K came up with a great idea, saved us about $500,000. Stephen Wilkinson had never seen it before. BE&K had used it on a project in North Carolina, worked amazingly well. They researched it, everybody got together. The owner's representative, architect, general contractor all agreed that's the way we needed to go. It's going to save us money. So you get the coordination with the CMAR when you have that. But again, the key is the owner's rep. But in order to do that, we've got to craft an RFQ. It's been a long time since we've done one. It was the county courthouse. Talking with Franny today, a number of places around the state have utilized CMAR in the last year or two. She said, she can certainly do some research, get us a good RFQ for our owner's representative. That's the key component moving forward. So these are just baby steps. I don't want to sit here and tell you, oh, here's what we're looking at, and we're looking at a 2.5-year construction time frame. Not going there. Owner's representative will do that. So basically tonight asking if council's comfortable with the CMAR, I'll tell Franny that's the methodology we want to use. If you want to hear from Franny at the next meeting, we can have her here. Requesting permission to engage McNair, or Foreman McNair, to handle the bonds because they handle our bonds for the project, and to work with Franny to get an RFQ developed for the owner's representative. And those are the first steps in moving forward on this project.
I've got some questions. I don't know whether wait on Franny to put together our FQ or not, because I know we used it across the street at the courthouse. Larry, you was on the council at that point,
Yeah.
right? And apparently it went very well.
I have complained about the slowness, the inability for us to get information on projects around. We did not have that with the courthouse. We had not just we were told we had a printed results of what took place in a month's time, and we were kept up to date, and we knew what was going on. And if we had a question, we relayed it to Mr. Willis, and he got with our risk management guy here, and he took care of it. And it was one of the smoothest operations in my working life that I have been involved with. And we had a local guy that was there with us as our construction manager, and he did a wonderful, wonderful job, saved this county money, and brought us out ahead about 7 months earlier than we had anticipated being in our courthouse.
And I think that's my follow-up question, is that I know it's going to be a team, a group. I think it's Steve and Brian and Veronica, you and Franny and whatever, that will pretty much sit down and get everything together. Now, how will we go about selecting the owner representatives? Do we go through a process, or is that recommended through committee, through the group?
The RFQ, once it's out, it has to be publicly published. It'll go in SCIBO. We can have any number of groups or individuals apply to be the owner's representative. Those will come in, and then utilizing a process similar to what we used for the county courthouse, we had a design team that reviewed it. Obviously won't be using the clerk of court this time. What I'm proposing is the sheriff, the chief magistrate, council chair, council vice chair, Veronica, and myself. And then Kathy McDaniels in procurement, John DeBose is a lawyer, and John will be working with a construction lawyer. And again, John cannot be here tonight. We'll have that information for you. I know that was one thing council had some concerns with. We have another construction lawyer that John is very comfortable with, Franny's comfortable with, and John would cover that because that's into the legal
I'm
realm.
saying from that group you just named will come the recommendation of the owner representative and the general contract and all that. Those guys will bring that back for us for discussion,
Right.
or is that the process?
Yes, ma'am. Council has to sign off on all this, make sure we're happy. But again, we'll have the owner's representative heavily involved in selection of the architect and the GC.
Are we looking for a motion, or
Well, basically,
is this
not,
just
I don't know if
discussion?
you need a motion. If council's not comfortable, if you want to hear from Franny for the CMAR because she cannot be here tonight, that's fine. We can hold off on that decision until February the 8th. But I would like permission to go ahead and then tell Franny, we need you to get started on the bond work.
Well, Steve, you're a builder. What's your position?
I build a single-family houses.
No,
I
I'm
don't
talking
build a
about
$50
you
million
are-
jail.
You
That's-
understand the process is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's gonna be a long process. There's, like I said, we've got to decide on that. We don't even have property. All that's got to be a lot of due diligence up front for site.
That's where we need the owner's rep, somebody that
Yeah.
actually speaks phase one geotechnical analysis.
Now,
that
will
can
we
go
go
out.
outside of the area for that person, or what, how will we select that person?
We'll have the RFQ that will go out. Once we have the deadline and we have the submissions, if council's okay with this, the committee that we've talked about will review everything, bring the full council a recommendation. Here's our owner's rep. At that point, the owner's rep will work with John and the labor attorney, whose name John knows and I don't, and procurement to start work on selecting an architect and a general contractor.
Chairman, I'm very comfortable with moving in this direction. I think
ma'am.
if you look in the construction industry for large-scale projects, a lot of times you're going to see this very.
Well, I can tell you from my experience, from 2012, 2016, I saw more design, bid, build than I saw construction management at risk. But I think the first step that needs to be made is we need to meet our construction attorney, vet him, and let him give us some insight. See, when you go design, bid, build, you can still have an owner's rep. And as a matter of fact, I thought that's what we were hiring a year or so ago. When we hired Kelvin Alexander, we would find somebody that could look after our best interest during the course of these projects. Not that if we have so many going on, one person probably cannot handle it, but I do think we would be remiss if we moved forward without talking to whomever is going to be our construction attorney first and foremost. I mean, I'm sure Franny's got a lot of direct experience with construction because of bonding, but there's a whole area of law, construction litigation, that I'm sure she probably has never litigated.
You know, because of the time frame of this, I think we've got time to do all of those.
And see, when you go construction management, a lot of times people do it because they're in a hurry. So your generals are trying to bid to the owner's rep and the owners, and they're taking their drawings and they're giving it to subs, and they're going like it's 60% drawings, and they're saying, give us your maximum price. Well, if you ask me to give you a price and I don't have the full drawings because the devil is in the details, what am I going to do? I'm going to mark them up considerably to overcome anything I can't say in that next 40% that's not been presented to me. So whereas I think construction management risk has a lot of good points, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't go there, I just think we need some counsel here from who's going to be the construction manager, that input, and what kind of litigation has evolved from that kind of process. You know, again, I don't think we're in a hurry, so I think we have time to vet this step by step. And I think I wrote that in an email to y'all when Steve first brought up some of these issues a couple of months ago.
I didn't read it. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, you always ignore me, but that's fine. But seriously, we need to talk to our attorney first.
Well, I'm curious, Alan, you say we got a lot of time at the pace we're going, on our last projects, I don't know if we got a lot of time.
I think that's gonna be left up to us to demand and request whatever information we need to move forward, and don't let it drag. Because if we let it drag, it's our own fault.
It's our own fault, you're exactly right.
All right, in our February workshop, can we have possibly a construction attorney on board or to look at, and so we can make a final decision on the method? Or
Committee of the Whole's filling up pretty quick unless y'all want to spend about 3 or 4 hours. Let me talk to John and see if we can, I know Franny's available on the 8th. I don't know about her availability on the 9th.
Okay.
And we'll have that, but sounds like, we definitely want to hold off on selecting a methodology. I certainly have no problem with that. But without council objection, I'll go ahead and ask Franny to say, Franny, we know we're going to use you on the bonds. The first thing is working with Veronica, get that resolution, reimbursement resolution going, and just ask her, send us some recent examples of owners rep RFQs. Not that we're going to publish them. We'll hold off till we have the meeting on the 8th, but at least we'll have that ball rolling, so we're doing something rather than just waiting on the 8th.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we can see that what we've been doing in the past has not been very good. A good example is our EMS station up in Indian Land where water running in the door. We got a EMS headquarters building up here that's been sitting there for 3 years, and we just now got work going on it. We don't need to build a detention center under these conditions. We need to get somebody who follows the thing through. We have a plan. We're gonna build. Let him keep us informed. Let's keep our hands out of it, but let's look at the dollar figures. We don't need to tell him how to do it. Just tell him we want it done, and we don't want it to be done in 10 years. We want it to be done 2 or 3 years. I'd be happy. I might get to see it, you know.
Well, and again, I think the owner's representative is the key, and certainly want to clarify for council. You know, Kelvin's a project manager, and he's a doggone good project manager. He oversees the small things. He's not on the level of an owner's rep. You know, you didn't give me authorization for 6 figures to hire a project manager, so that's kind of the differential where we're looking at there, as Councilman Honeycutt indicated.
I think we need to get the ball rolling, but as Mr. Blackman said,
And like I said, the last two,
we can
I
bring
can
in the
get.
attorney, talk to them, and then
Right.
decide what direction.
We'll set that up for the 8th. I'll talk to John DeBose, but I will, go ahead and tell Franny, at least get started on what we need to do on the bonding, get with Veronica on a reimbursement resolution, send us some examples of an RFQ for an owner's rep we can look at, and start massaging it. So if council says on the 8th you're happy, we're ready to move forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Willis. I think that, was there anything else on the miscellaneous reports? Mr. Willis, anything? All right, do I have a motion to go in executive session?
So moved.
To discuss economic development project. I think we're going to delay Project Creamsicle, and
Project Creamsicle.
Mr. Gilbert requested that he will put that on the next agenda, and a legal briefing and a contractual matter. Do I have a motion?
Yeah. Okay.
Motion for Mr. Blackman, second. Second for Mr. Carnes. All in favor, raise your right hand. We're now in executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I believe, like last time, we're going to remain in here, and I'll just make sure everybody's outside the room.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be back 5 minutes.
Just had to make sure the,
Can you believe I agree? You don't have to beg this